USCHO.com. This is the USCHO Weekend Review podcast from U.S. College Hockey Online at USCHO.com. A look at this weekend in college hockey and a review of the top news of the week.
Welcome to the Weekend Review podcast for Monday, December 7th, 2020. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly. Jim, what a great weekend for the top three teams in last week's USCHO.com poll. North Dakota and Minnesota Duluth both going 3-0 in the NCHC Pod. And Boston College with a weekend sweep of Providence didn't give up a goal and scored 12, including 9 in the second game at Schneider Arena against Providence.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we realized that the voters early on in the season seemed to have this right. Don't forget, these are the three teams that have been the top three teams all the way since the preseason poll. So we're finally getting a chance to sample these clubs. And for North Dakota and Minnesota Duluth, it was last weekend the first time we were going to have a chance to see them play, or last week, I guess, as their bubble started early last week. And very impressive for both teams. They found ways to win different types of games, a lot of close games. Of course, North Dakota ends up pulling one out in Denver against Denver in overtime. These are the types of wins early season that get your confidence going. Then when you go to Boston College, that was such a complete weekend for the Eagles. Statistically, maybe that 9-0 game seems very off. I think Providence, out attempted BC something like 74-45. I think it was in that range. They won 55% of the faceoffs. Yet for some reason, the puck hopped in the net for BC all night. A 9-0 victory. You rarely see a coach pull their starting goaltender, put in the backup, put the starter back in, pull him again, and then put the backup back in. But that's what happened for Providence on that night. BC 3 shorthanded goals in that game as well. Just one of those nights, I think, for Providence, you just want to turn the page, get away from. The only unfortunate thing is that Nate Lehman, I believe the next morning, was on a plane to Michigan to go coach the World Junior team. So you're the head coach. You really just want to kind of find a way to calm your guys down. You have to leave. You have to leave it in the hands of very able-bodied assistants led by Ronnie Ralston. But it just was one of those nights for Providence that everything just went wrong.
And a great weekend for Spencer Knight. You'd say maybe a lopsided game, maybe not a lot of attempts, but 30 saves on Friday, 36 saves in that 9-0 win. Of course, BC's going to lose him to the World Juniors as well.
Yeah, and then we'll talk a little bit more about World Juniors a little later. There's a lot of players and many of the different leagues heading off, but he just looks solid. I've talked about this about many goaltenders. A guy that I used to see a lot of, Connor Hellebuck, was always well known for this. You didn't feel like he had to make any 4-bell, 5-bell saves, but it's mostly because Knight is so positionally strong. He was always in position for the shot. I think Providence got some of the looks that they wanted. I do know that BC, from a defensive standpoint, was able to keep them to the perimeter for much of both of the games. But when they got into that grade A scoring area, Knight was there. Again, he didn't make it look difficult. He honestly made it look like a pedestrian couple of shutouts, if that's even a term that can be used properly in the game of hockey. But I just think that he's ready. This is a kid that is, he had a good start last year, and I think he is ready to really, take a step forward, become an even better goaltender. He's obviously going to get some stiff competition up here at the World Junior Tournament. I'm sure he's probably going to be the man in net for the U.S. with experience. So he's playing well. It's a good time to be Spencer Knight.
One team that needs to be mentioned in the same conversation with those other three teams is Minnesota. They are now 6-0. They swept Michigan State over the weekend. Every time I watch Minnesota, I'm more and more impressed with them, and I think they are going to be, assuming we get a whole season and an end of the season, they're going to be one of the teams right in there, and I would not be surprised to see the Golden Gophers at some point during the season ending up being number one in the poll, depending on what other teams do.
Yeah, it's really interesting to me for kind of I talked about how those top three have been the top three all along in our poll: North Dakota, BC, Minnesota, Duluth. I don't even think that they've shifted positions at all. Minnesota, though, they've been a team that has kind of consistently moved. They were in the preseason poll, I believe, at number 14, and every week they've just taken small steps forward. And I think you and I talked, it was a couple of weeks ago, maybe as the Big Ten was getting underway, and I said that, this is a team that has a lot of great offense. Well, what's standing out to me right now is how good their defense and goaltending has been. You get Jack LaFontaine with a goals against of about 1.1. They've allowed only more than one goal twice. They've had a shutout. I think 3 games where they allowed only a single goal. I mean, the back end, the defense is really what's getting it done, because the offense, face it, I mean, they're not exploding. They're not putting up 6-8 goals a game. These are 3-1, 4-2 victories that Minnesota is getting. So not only are you getting a performance out of your defense, which is very solid, your goaltending solid, but you're learning how to win these tight games early in the season. And another thing that we've talked about is that this Minnesota team in years past maybe hasn't gotten off to fast starts. Well, here you are, 6-0. That's as fast of a start as you can get off to, and they're playing extremely solid hockey right now.
Well, speaking of fast starts, we also have to talk about a slow start, and it's not that the Denver Pioneers are playing bad hockey. They're playing very good hockey, but they've had some difficult times in the NCHC bubble. Jordan Kawaguchi scored against them in overtime, a 4-3 win for North Dakota over Denver. And that was a game that was within reach for Denver the whole time. They had the lead in that game, but 0-3 is digging a little bit of a hole.
Yeah, well, it's who you face too. North Dakota, Minnesota, Duluth, and I believe Omaha was the other opponent. And we'll get to Omaha a little later. They're playing, probably better than a lot of teams. A lot of folks expected them to right out of the gate. And when you look at Denver, I think Dave Starman had the comment on social media. He had talked to a scout that said, boy, here they are 0-3. They could be 3-0 easily. And I wouldn't be surprised to see them come out of this bubble 6-4. That's, they're playing good hockey, but if you're David Carl, now you're just in a situation where you're trying to keep your kids focused and say, we're doing the right things, guys. We're having maybe some lapses here, and that's resulting in a goal, or it's resulting in a breakdown. You've got to just find a way to not let this turn into too much of a negative, because like we said, they've played 3 very good games. Now we're at a point where you just have to see the results, and we're still results-based society. We still want gratification. The nice thing about this bubble is that you can start 0-3, and then you don't have to wait a week or have a bye week and maybe be waiting 2 weeks to get back on the ice. They'll be right back at it tomorrow, I believe, and that's what they need right now.
Well, you mentioned Omaha, another team that is doing pretty well. They're 2-2. They caught my eye with that 10-2 win over Western Michigan last week. Seems like a pretty good start for Omaha in their home arena, but not always having home ice advantage.
Well, I mean, there is no home ice advantage in that bubble. Maybe you just know the boards a little bit more than anything. But I like that. They played Minnesota Duluth very tough on the first night. The first game, I believe it was, of the bubble. And then, a 10-2 victory, like you said, on Thursday. And then Saturday, they, find a way to get an overtime win. And then, a setback on Sunday. But you're also talking about playing 4 games from Tuesday to Sunday. That's got to wear on their team a little bit. They're now going to kind of thin that schedule out a little bit and go Wednesday, Saturday, Sunday. So they'll have some time off between these games to rest up a little bit. But I believe I can't say this for sure, but I think they were the only team to play 4 games in the bubble in the first week. So they have put a lot of effort in at this point, and decent results. I'm sure that they would have liked those 2 losses to Duluth and St. Cloud State, pretty close games. But I think that they're going to be a pretty good team. Mike Gabinet has this team playing well, and obviously the offense is clicking to score 10 in the game. Many have said that was a very close game and that kind of got away from Western Michigan. But listen, 10 goals is a lot to score no matter who you are.
Well, and you talk about Mike Gabinet, one of the top young coaches at 39. That's pretty young in head coaching. 4th year behind the bench. He's the first alum for Omaha as head coach. And in your fourth season, that's the point where you finally have really been able to put your stamp on things, get your players, your system, getting everything rolling. And I think this portends good things for the Mavericks.
Yeah, I would think so. Don't forget they had some very nice years under Dean Blaze in his time, and some big NCAA wins and appearances. And I think that it's a team that I don't know if you've been out there. I think you have. I've been out there, and when this is a normal season, they put a good crowd into that Baxter Arena. It's a beautiful building, easy to recruit into, nice little downtown. Everything about Omaha is attractive in my mind, and could be. Even look at I feel like they are kind of in the center of the USHL for recruiting. So there are some advantages there, and it's just getting, like you said, getting the system right, getting the players in place that you want, and Mike Gabinet has that stamp at this point on that program.
I'm with you on Omaha, great city. I've loved my visits there.
This is the USCHO Weekend Review podcast from US College Hockey Online.
Continuing with the USCHO Weekend Review podcast, I'm Ed Trefzger with Jim Connelly. Some upsets over the weekend to take note of. Minnesota State, only their third loss since the beginning of this calendar year, as they were 15-2-1 before COVID hit. And Michigan Tech upsetting them. That's probably going to give them a bump or two in the poll, maybe. And we'll talk about that in a moment. But a nice win for Michigan Tech.
It certainly was. And Minnesota State had a pause there because they had COVID move through their program, and I believe they lost 2 weekends. So I don't know what the effects of that might have been, but you can't take anything away from Michigan Tech. Michigan Tech has been a program that every year we have to mention them, and even when they're a team that's somewhere around 500, they're still always pulling off some good wins, some impressive wins. And here was another one on Sunday night, over a team that doesn't lose a lot. It's I know that the Minnesota State had a late loss to Bemidji kind of right before things were paused last year, but as you said, they were 15-2-1 since the calendar year began, and then 1-0 to start this basically 2020-2021 season before having to pause. So I think that Minnesota State is still going to be a great team. They're well coached. We know that. But a great one for Tech. You want to see those wins early in the season if you're a program like Tech.
Another upset, a home and home split, but Merrimack getting the win over UMass, a competitive Merrimack team that wasn't so much that way last year.
Yeah, obviously I'm out here in Hockey East land. I talk to a lot of people, and people always say, oh, watch out for Merrimack. They're going to be good this year. Watch out for Merrimack. And they haven't been. It's been a while since they've had, any really solid teams. I had some inklings that maybe they were going to be better. I know I think I picked them. I probably picked them 10th or 11th in my preseason season preview for Hockey East, but I know that they have some very good players, and it's just, what kind of effort can you put out? And I got to see a little bit of the UMass game on Friday, or I'm not sure if it was Friday or Saturday night, but one of those nights, I think it was Saturday night, and then it was Sunday that they won back at Merrimack. So I got to see a little bit of that game out at UMass, and I thought that they were skating well with the Minutemen, and that's a very fast Minutemen team. And, to see that they, on Sunday, you go back home, you find a way to win that game. It was one of those games where Merrimack grabbed the lead, UMass answered. Merrimack took the lead, UMass answered, and then Merrimack re-grabbed the lead. It was they had to hold on to a 1-goal lead for almost half the hockey game because the game-winning goal came in the second period. So I think that's a nice little statement win. It's been a while for Merrimack. They were one of those schools that weren't going to be allowed to play any games until December. So this was their first weekend. They've been skating, staying healthy, and here they come out, first weekend, and they pull off kind of a statement win.
One other weekend split of note, you could call it the Hank Johnson show for Mercyhurst, the goaltender transfer from Bemidji, playing his senior season in Erie, Pennsylvania, made 38 saves on the road in a 2-1 win at Bowling Green on Saturday. On Sunday, at home, a 3-1 loss for Mercyhurst, but Hank made 48 saves in that game. Mercyhurst picked at the bottom of Atlantic hockey, but when you've got some really strong goaltending, and I know Coach Rick Gotkin loves his goaltenders, when you've got a goaltender who you can really love like that, you may be able to make a little more noise than people expected.
Yeah, I talked to Rick after the upset win on Friday night, and obviously he was thrilled with the victory. But the one thing he said, and it's kind of going back to what we were talking about with the Minnesota netminder, is he said it was just a game where Hank Johnson made it look easy. He said, here he is making save after save, but nothing ever felt like he was out of position or had to scramble. He said that he just made solid saves, controlled his rebounds well, and then obviously got peppered again on Sunday and found a way to get that victory as well. So, that's a nice start. But, I was joking with Rick, and he, anybody that knows Rick Gotkin knows that he can take some good-natured ribbing well. I said to him, the last time I talked to you, Rick, it was after you had upset Arizona State in the first game of last season. And then they went on to have the worst pairwise in the entire country by the end of the season. I think he said, yeah, we had that good win, Jimmy, and then I don't think we won one for 28 games. So, so he's very aware that, one win does not make your season, but it's still a nice one to get right out of the gate.
Well, and it's an interesting thing to note that some of these transfers, whether it's grad transfers, seniors, whatever, often are transferring from programs where they didn't get as much playing time as they would have liked, particularly goaltenders, and go on to really have terrific senior seasons. And in the case of Hank Johnson, if you check it out on the Twitter account for Mercyhurst Hockey, there's a nice little video there where he's reading a letter from his parents who could not be there for their senior night, he's reading the letter from them, and it's pretty touching, so you might want to check that one out. Well, let's turn to World Juniors. In the World Junior Camp, it's underway. You mentioned Nate Lehman having to head over to Michigan for that, and some of the players. A lot of holes are going to be left behind in lineups for teams, but before we get to that, some disappointment for 3 players slated for the roster from Boston University.
Yeah, BU, I believe it was Friday or Thursday or Friday, announced that their series this past weekend was not going to be played because they had some COVID cases within the program. Because of that, the exposure of Robert Mastrosimone, Alex Vlasic, and Drew Comesso, all of them had to be left home when camp started. USA Hockey had some strict protocols that nobody that had been exposed to COVID could kind of come into their bubble in Plymouth, Michigan for camp. And then that kind of carries forward going up into Canada for the actual tournament. So they were left home. A couple of junior players added, a player from the North Dakota roster as well added. But this is a tournament that every kid, I think, that has some success in hockey dreams of playing in. So it's got to be very difficult for the 3 of these guys. I don't know who, we'll never find out who the players are that have COVID within the program, but, imagine that they don't have it and you're just sitting there saying, oh, I was exposed and now that takes away my entire tournament. This was my chance. This was the chance to play for my country. It's got to be disappointing for them.
And you're going to see teams, and you already have seen teams, with reduced rosters because of contact tracing, players who may not or did not show positive but were in contact and out of precaution are not allowed to play. Well, we talked before we got on today about the poll, and both of us provide ballots in the USCHO.com poll. It's predominantly coaches, but some media involved in that too. And man, that was tough filling out the ballot today. You go down through, here's your top 20, here are teams receiving votes. So there's like half the teams or more where there's some votes that were received last week. And you look through and probably half the top 20 has sub 500 records and another handful haven't played any games yet. It's really tough to fill out after about the top 4 or 5 teams.
I agree. I thought my top 4 was easy: BC, North Dakota, Minnesota Duluth, Minnesota. Those were simple. They haven't, none of those teams have lost a game at this point. But, after that, believe it or not, with 3 losses, I had to have Denver because I know how good of a team this is. They just had 3 tough games right out of the gate. I still believe they're a top 10 team. I have them in my top 5. And then, as I get through my top 15, I have 4 different teams that haven't played a game, in my top 25 different teams that haven't played. So it's a little crazy to try to put together a ballot this year, a little bit more challenging than it ever has been. But somebody asked me a few weeks ago, does the poll even matter this year? And, my defense is that the poll might matter this year more than ever because you really won't have a pairwise ranking this year that even if somebody runs all the numbers, it won't have the same impact it typically would because there's just so little interconference play. The pairwise is really, sort of made to show how your conference performs in non-conference play, and thus the conferences that perform the best, they get the most teams toward the top of the pairwise. The conferences that have really poor non-conference showings, they usually don't have any teams ranked in the top 16. And so when you're going to come down to the end of the season, I don't know how they're going to select an NCAA tournament if we're able to pull one off. But if you're trying to just select at-large teams that don't get an automatic qualifier, you're probably going to have to look at polls a little bit to make decisions. So I do believe at some point the polls will take on a different meaning. And because of that, it's very difficult now, but we're going to have to put a lot of thought. Every one of the 40 voters that we have in the poll, they're going to have to put a good amount of thought in because I do feel that the polls will have a lot of influence in who makes the NCAA tournament this year.
Well, and people often don't understand what the purpose of the poll is. The poll is basically a snapshot of how people think teams are playing or how their talent level is at a certain time. We get emails all the time from people complaining about the poll, generally because they feel that their team is disrespected or their region is disrespected. And usually they start out something like, "Dear knuckleheads at USCHO." But, it's like, how can you vote for this team? They haven't played a game yet. Imagine what our preseason poll would look like if we couldn't vote for any team who hadn't played yet. I mean, it would be blank.
Blank sheet of paper.
But it's based on what people who vote are thinking about the quality of the teams. And if a team hasn't played yet, but who they've got back and who they're bringing in and what you can expect from them, then you can make an educated guess. And, I don't know the exact number, but out of the 50 voters we have between head coaches and assistant coaches, something like 30 or maybe just a hair more that are coaches. Now, if you want to say that coaches of half the teams in Division I college hockey don't know what they're talking about, fair game. Go ahead and do it. But, I think that they have an idea, and the journalists and broadcasters who are involved in voting are all people who have their pulse on things. People are distributed fairly evenly by league and by region. The whole thing is not meant to be some objective tally like the pairwise or some of the other ranking systems. Computers can do that. You need the wetware of the gray matter to kind of have an idea subjectively what they're seeing, because the numbers don't tell the whole story. And I know people want to say, "Oh, the numbers tell the whole story." They don't tell the whole story. If you want to root for numbers and be a fan of numbers, join an Excel spreadsheet league and have at it. But I don't even know if there is such a thing. But it's all about the subjectivity. And I'll give you a side example on this before I drop the subject for at least for a few more weeks. Look at what has happened to baseball. It has all gotten about analytics and numbers. And Theo Epstein, stepping down from the Cubs a couple of weeks ago, has said analytics has ruined the aesthetics of the game. Be a fan of the aesthetics of college hockey and don't think everything has to be jammed into numbers in a spreadsheet. So, yeah, the numbers say who's an at-large when the pairwise runs, but the poll is about what people who are educated in the sport think they're seeing and rank talent and rank ability and performance. So that's the purpose of the poll.
Rant number 1 for the 2020-21 college hockey season. Good job, Ed.
Well, thank you. Well, Jim, anything else before we wrap this up?
Something that did come in just before we got on the air. Looks like Wisconsin is the next program that has gone on pause. They have at least one COVID case, and then with contact tracing, they're going to stop things. They were scheduled to play Minnesota State Tuesday and Wednesday evening. Those games have been postponed. So just trying to keep everybody up to date on kind of what's going on in the COVID world of college hockey. There you go, Wisconsin, the men's team. That is the first Big Ten team, I believe, to have any sort of problems with COVID inside their program since the season began.
Well, that's how things are going to go this year, and hopefully not too many times. Hopefully the Badgers can get healthy real soon. We'll wrap it up there. For Jim Connelly, I'm Ed Trefzger, and we'll catch you next time.
This has been the USCHO Weekend Review Podcast, a production of US College Hockey Online. Visit uscho.com/podcasts to listen or subscribe.